Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. So today I wanted to go ahead and start a series of discussions talking about how the summit can be fixed and, basically much more palatable for the community right now, because there are some really serious glaring, issues and aspects of this mode that is unsatisfactory to the community. Now, the good thing is this mode is in PTS. So there is room to be able to implement some incremental changes to make it much more appealing to people. Now, if you guys go back and watch some of my old videos when we were talking about this mode, when we still called it the skyscraper, I said for this mode to actually do well, it has to do a few things right. Today, I'm going to hammer on one of those things, and we're going to kind of flesh them out because a lot of members of the community are talking about this. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of the problem that I see and possibly the solution. So hang in with me and then let's just go through this. So first of all, this summit mode has 100 floors. Now, one of the really critical things about this mode is whenever you come to this mode and you're, playing, grinding through the entirety of, the floors, you are subject to an increased loot allocation of just one item. So today, if you're looking at this from the PTS, Overlord armament is the allocation of loot. Well, that means from when you play, from this mode from floor 1 all the way through 100, you have a higher allocation of Overlord armaments. I think that every 10 floors, or maybe even every so many floors, should have different allocations. If they don't want to make it too complex, perhaps every 20 floors should be able to keep their loot allocation as you make your progress through the game. I think that will be a much more fair, way to assess the situation if you really want to mix it up. But that's just one aspect of the loot game, to be very honest. I mean, there are other things that they can do with the loot that I want to propose in this video that I feel will also even potentially be better. And that means they will have to do some really cool things that will make this mode much more attractive. So when you play and you beat the very first 100 floors, some people have said it makes more sense if they allow for you to be able to change the difficulty starting from the very first floor. Because if you notice, the way the difficulty progresses is 1 through 11. Everything is normal. Hard is from 11 through 21, and then 21 through 31 is challenging, and then with the random objective, and then challenging with more random objectives, and then you move on to heroic until you get to legendary, and with more objectives as you're going through the 11th floor. Some people are wanting that the developers allow for them to be able to start from legendary, which would also affect the loot as well, because if they start out from legendary from floor 1 all the way up, then they start getting some of the better loot drops in the game. That is another possibility to make the loot game pretty strong, and I think it's a very solid idea. Now, my ideas about the loot game will be, number one, that they make it where every 10 floors you get a cache. Each cache has the potential to give you the number of items that are in that floor represents. So example is when you have floor 1 through when you hit the 10th floor or the 11th floor, which is a checkpoint, you get a cache that has 10 loot items. Those 10 loot items will be at the difficulty level at which you started playing it. So if you set it for maybe legendary difficulty, the 10 items in there will have the quality of legendary. When you make it to floor 20, you get another cache. That cache will then have 20 items rather than 10 items. And as you make it to floor 30 or floor 31, wherever the checkpoint is, you get 30 items. And by the time you get to floor 41, you get 40 items, 50 items, and all the way through when you get to 100, you will get a cache that literally has 100 gear and weapons and mods and mixture of everything inside of it. This is literally a whole backpack full of items. And so when you look at the incremental numbers of all what you're going to be getting, you're going to be able to come out of this skyscraper having enough loot to fill up your chest and fill up your characters. And all you got to do is go back to base of operations. If you played with a group, perhaps even better. If you're looking for something quite specific, then you have this loot pool to sort from. It sounds like a ridiculous, crazy idea, but like I said when I started this video, At this point in the game, there is something that we as players need, and it will have to be something a little extra out of the box. And it may sound crazy, but it is exactly what I think a lot of players will be motivated to do when they actually come to play this mode. Now, that is my very first proposal for what I think is going to work to allow for, players to be more interested in this summit mode. Now, the second potential, if they don't want to do it where people get too much loot, and if people say, well, that's just too much loot, we don't really need much loot like that, then they can also implement it where every 10 floors, you have the opportunity to open a cache. And the cache has a high propensity to drop exotics from them. And so remember, when we used to play Resistance back in the Division 1, whenever you opened, any room that had those chests, or whenever you gathered enough points to open the chest, every time the chest got open, and if you were in a group, you had a higher likelihood to get an exotic or classified gear items. Now, sometimes people wouldn't get them, but it also allowed for people to be able to farm and, exchange exotics that people didn't have, or in our case now, maybe gather exotics. And who knows, it might be a thing where they start to introduce exotics that are not in the general loot pool into the summit mode. Wink, wink, the Eagle Bearer. There are a lot of people who want to get the Eagle Bearer, and right now it's not as easy as it was to get in on a raid. There are people who are new to the game who may need to grind, as well to try to get, themselves up to that exotic. And sure, it will draw players away from the main raid itself. But to be honest, I mean, that raid has already, extended its lifetime as one whole year. So adding the Eagle Bearer into the loot pool, to me, doesn't really seem like a bad idea if it comes with the condition that it has a very slight possibility to drop in this mode from a cache from the floors. So I think if they implement the pattern of loot, which is basically based on, the premise that they can allow for you to be able to play this mode with the difficulty that you wish to play it after beating it, and then, you can at every 10 floors get a cache that grants you that many items in, that the floor number represents in that cache, or at every 10 floors and the save point, you have access to a cache that allows you the higher possibility of getting exotics. Now, to be very honest, I think that cache is already in the game, but it's not just in the PTS. I remember when I was playing on, the build that was, the early access build, I did see some kind of a cache, but it said I didn't have any keys to open it. So I think that might be a surprise that they were probably trying to save, but maybe they want to implement it in a different way, but it was there somewhere. So I wouldn't go ahead and throw the summit yet out of the water. It is still in PTS. And as we continue to suggest different implementations or improvements, they may make their way into the final form of this mode. Because if Massive goes ahead and tries to, execute this by themselves without the help of the community, I don't see it going over well. I think what they need to do is they need to now just buckle down and try to implement those things. I think the cash system, that the cash reward system that you're going to get that has a bunch of items in it all the way from floor 10 through 100 is the easiest that they can do, because they already have something of that nature in the, in the PTS, where you go to the base of operations and you're able to open a big old cache, and that cache literally will drop a whole ton of stuff for you. I mean, it's literally in the game as we're speaking right now. Well, it's in the PTS build, so I don't see any reason why they cannot implement something like that in the game, where it gives you a cache, and the cache has 20 items in it, or has 30 items in it, or has 100 items in it. It's not going to ruin your fun. If anything, you'll most likely be trying to farm those caches because they have a higher potential now to give you a better version of something you have. So I think if they do this, they're going to at least get a leg into salvaging, the perception right now that players have. But again, the PTS is still in the phase 1, so maybe we'll see something like that in PTS phase 2, or maybe in the full implementation of the game. So this is the beginning of a series of discussing this particular issue. And I wanted to make sure that, we as a community kind of start putting our feedback. So if you're listening to this video up to this point, in the comments section, add a little bit of, your opinions and your thoughts on improvements that you think could be made for this particular mode, because we want this mode to come out and to be buffed up. And it also, I think, needs to be a mode like a whiteboard, where the developers basically are able to implement a good number of sensible, recommendations from the community, because it's really going to play into a lot of everything that's going to happen, down the road. So I think it's a very critical time for the developers, and also critical time for the community as well, to be able to shape this mode before it actually gets dropped. So that's pretty much my video for today. I appreciate you guys a lot. Thank you very much for even listening to the video, and thank you for your time and audience. And hopefully we'll see in another video. Peace out.